All right. Welcome to the PTI seminar series. I would like to introduce for this month. We've been organizing this for a long time, haven't we, Richard? We just keep moving it around. Yes. So here today to talk to us about understanding REDCap at IU is Richard Meraz, who's the manager of the Advanced Biomedical IT Core, which is part of Research Technologies. Richard, take it away.
Well, thank you for coming today. As I was preparing this presentation, I was reflecting a little bit on a theme, and in particular, colleagues who I admire very much and who motivate me to come to work and to work on these sorts of things. And so I thought I would begin this presentation with a little reflection, and we would do this together. So I'll just offer you the picture and the quote. Just take it in for a minute and I'll read it and then I'll say a few things. So all of our philosophy is dry as dust if it is not immediately translated into some act of living service. And the first act of living service I'm going to ask is to make Zoom be quiet. Can anybody do that? No, we won't worry about that. Think about this for a minute, right? Our philosophy, we all think, we all have ideas, we all come to work, we all do lots of things. The people who inspire me the most and who I look to are people who act on what they believe. They have an idea, it's in their head, they have a conviction, they combine their head and their heart. And I picked this picture. Does anybody recognize where this is? Death Valley. It's Death Valley, and one of the wonderful things about Death Valley is when the rain comes, it turns into one of the most beautiful places on earth. Otherwise, it's a desolate wasteland. So I thought I would offer this when the head and the heart come together and you act with conviction, you care about what you do, well, this is what your ideas turn into, something pretty amazing. So we're going to answer 3 questions today. How do we understand REDCap at Indiana University? First, we'll talk about the team that I manage, the Advanced Biomedical IT Core. Then we'll talk about REDCap, why I think it's important, why a lot of people think it's important. And finally, what is the service that we offer around REDCap? We'll take each of these questions in turn. So the first place I think to start to understand a team is the organizational chart. That's why we publish these. I work for Research Technologies. My team works for Research Technologies. We report to Matt Link, who's here in the audience. I think most of us are from Research Technologies, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much. But maybe for the people who are on Zoom. In Research Technologies, we bring cyber infrastructure to research. People, which means expertise, intelligence, energy, technology, a range of technology from commodity, cloud, to very sophisticated systems, and solutions and software, meaning that we take our intelligence, we take these tools, and we are a trusted partner for scholarly activity across the university. That's what we do. In November of last year, our leaders in Research Technologies, they published our principles. And I wanted to share these because I think it's really important when you work for an organization to know the principles by which you should do your work. Principles are what keep you rooted. Principles are how you gauge you're doing the right things. I'm not going to read through these. I just would like everyone online and here just to look at them because even though they were published internally, I haven't seen them around campus too much, but I think they're very important. And I'll dwell just on the first 2. So the first principle here is proactive research engagement. So when I saw that, what did that mean to me? It means I'm not sitting around waiting for things to come to me. I understand the scholarly landscape on campus, and I'm out there looking for collaboration. I'm looking to bring my tools to the people who need them at the university. Innovating in anticipation of research cyber infrastructure needs. It means that I'm not attached to what I do. I may be good at what I do, but if I need to change that or evolve that in order to serve the research needs of the university, And a few of us have done that. I think one person sitting here pivoted from operations support to being an expert in deep learning, within a few months. So all of us need to be able to do that. And I mentioned this because if you're going to understand my team and research technologies, you should understand our ethos. What do we do? What are our convictions? And just finally, just to locate us on the org chart, these are all the different groups in research technologies. We all have a focus. We all have a specialty. I've put everybody in my group on here, so full-time staff and part-time staff, at least one of them who we're trying to convert to full-time. And what's our angle? What is the angle for the Advanced Biomedical IT Core? Electronic protected health information. So researchers on campus who are dealing with health information as part of data science, as part of medical informatics, as part of clinical research, you can't treat this data like you would treat other kinds of data. So the angle that my team has in taking in the landscape of research at the university is to focus on the particular needs of this group of people. And it's having the largest medical school in the country means that this is a very, very important area that we need to be concerned about. So that's what my team focuses on. Another landscape. So in taking into account all of the researchers who work with protected health information, that's a broad group. How do we address this? How do we take in this landscape of people and possibilities? I've put this picture here for a reason. It's beautiful. I think if you recognize it, it's Ansel Adams, Yosemite, storm clearing at winter. But if you know this group of people we work with, it's a beautiful group. But there are features of this landscape that are particularly interesting. So how do we take in this land? I'll just pause, because those of you who are on the inside know what I'm talking about. I'll just pause here and let you take in this picture. So how do we take in this landscape? All the people at the university who deal with protected health information, you can't address them individually necessarily. Yes, a department comes to us, we'll work with them, but you have to have a strategy. You have to pick those groups that you're going to collaborate with so that you can multiply your ability to serve as many people as you can. So for us in research technologies, these are the groups that we focus on. And I'll talk about them in turn. The Indiana Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute, the Regan Street Institute, the Precision Health Grand Challenge, and the CRIO, the Chief Research Information Officer Leadership Team, of which I'm part of. In supporting these groups, we support most of the biomedical research, all of the biomedical research, if you will, on campus, by addressing the needs of these particular groups. We're going to talk about that. So the Indiana CTSI was founded in 2008 by Ananta Shekhar. If you know the Grand Challenges, you probably recognize that name. It's a National Institutes of Health grant, and they really have three goals. They care about public or population health. They care about taking basic science and moving it into clinical care. And they care about training new scientists. So the NIH has invested in 60 such institutions around the country. This is their Clinical and Translational Science Award. It's about $500 million. And Indiana University, we don't have the highest award. There are other institutions with bigger ones, but we're in the top 20 in the country in terms of the size of this award. Again, it was founded in 2008. We're on our third round. And in addressing this group, we're addressing researchers because a researcher can go to the CTSI, they can apply for money for seed research. They can find people who can help them get their project started. Students can find training opportunities. The name of my group tells you something, the Advanced Biomedical IT Core. We're one of these service cores that the CTSI supports. And finally, the CTSI serves a very important role of, throughout the state of Indiana, recruiting people to clinical trials at the university. And that's very important. So this is one of our major partners. And this is just to emphasize that the CTSI is it's a partnership between Indiana University, Purdue University, Notre Dame, and many private institutions, many public-private partnerships throughout the state. So the next group, Regenstrief Institute. This is a world-famous group. They founded the first medical record system. They developed it there. They've been around for almost 40 years now, if not 40 years. And most of their members are members of the School of Medicine. They do a lot of research. We focus on really one particular group at the Regenstrief Institute. It's a group called the Data Core. The Data Core controls access to the two most important sources of health information for research in the state. This is the Indiana Health Information Exchange and the IU Health Enterprise Data Warehouse. If you've gone to the doctor in the state of Indiana and you weren't paying attention to your consent forms, your data is in the Indiana Health Information Exchange. And even if you were, it's a good thing to put your data in there. They take care of it and it helps research. If you're an investigator at Indiana University and you want to get access to one of these data sources to do your research, you have to go to Regenstrief. The Regenstrief Data Core will evaluate your request. You have to have a valid institutional review board approved study at the university. And then the Regenstrief Institute will go into these systems and get your data. We support them in many different ways, providing them infrastructure. They're big users of REDCap, so on and so forth. The Precision Health Grand Challenge, unless you've been under a rock or in a cave, you know well about the Grand Challenges. I'm not going to dwell on this. There's two components to this Grand Challenge. There's a clinical component, so we're trying to cure disease, and they've picked some really important ones. And there's an academic component. We're trying to grow capabilities at the university, research capabilities, training capabilities. And so our partnership here is on the research side, and we'll talk about later why REDCap's absolutely critical infrastructure for clinical research. And on the academic side, growing these research capabilities. And this is just a slide from Dr. Shekhar, who's the lead of the Precision Health Grand Challenge. It just shows you how we're tackling these different diseases from different points of view. So whether it be genomic medicine, immune therapy, you can read the rest of them, but the data and informatics pillar is where research technologies is putting our effort. And so finally, in terms of the groups that we address in the School of Medicine, associated with the School of Medicine, health science research at the university, the CRIO leadership team. So this is a picture of Jeremy Harper. Jeremy joined us about a year ago. He came from Ohio State University. He joined about the time the CEO of Regenstrief, Peter Emby, joined the university. I don't think he's on the call, so I'm not going to embarrass him. He's a great guy. He's got a lot of energy. He's very motivated. He's looking for collaborations. He's the CRIO of Regenstrief and the Indiana CTSI. So if you think about that, he's one individual who has a lot of levers of influence over how health research is addressed here at the university. So by being part of his leadership team, and he did something smart. He came here, he didn't have a staff right away. So the first thing he did is he looked around him and he said, who's supporting research at the university? Who are the people who have staff, who have ideas that I want to meet with every week to hash out how we're going to address research at the university? And he put us together. You'll notice that we're across different institutions for Regenstrief, Cates, the IU School of Medicine Department of Biostatistics. Before you just think that that's just another department, the Department of Biostatistics sees almost every clinical research study at the university. They see that data at some point. So if you're working with them, you're supporting them, you're multiplying your effect on research. So it's really important to have them there. Bob Davis, he heads up clinical data management for them. The Cancer Center, David Pierce, who's my colleague on the Precision Health Grand Challenge, and then myself at Research Technologies. And you'll notice that this is mostly at the director or even manager level where I'm at. The reason it's not necessarily higher is because we have staff. So if we get together as a group and we have an idea and we want to address a problem that's going to affect research, all of us have staff who can actually do stuff. So it's very easy for us, once I get Robert and Matt to approve something, to put something into action and cut through a lot of politics. So this is a great group to be part of. So I just wanted you to be, not everybody's aware of these groups. Not everyone's aware of how they influence research on campus and why we would focus on them. So I wanted to address that before we get into REDCap. So now we'll talk about what is REDCap, why is it important? So REDCap stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. So it's web-based software. And as the picture shows here, a lot of research, a lot of clinical research was and is collected on paper. And if you're trying to analyze data, that's inefficient. REDCap was developed at Vanderbilt University. Its development started in 2005. It's not open source, but neither is it proprietary. So anybody who's a nonprofit institution can go to Vanderbilt, can sign a license, has the right to install and offer REDCap as a service at their university, provided you don't charge for it. And that's kind of that's an issue sometimes if you're trying to build a support staff. So you can't charge people to use REDCap, but you can charge for consulting services around REDCap. So there's a spectrum there that one has to navigate. So when I first heard about REDCap, I said to myself, well, isn't electronic data capture, isn't this obvious? Why would you write things down pieces of paper? Why wouldn't, if you can collect it in a computer, why wouldn't you take your paper form and turn it into an electronic form? Well, you'd think it's obvious, but here's a recent paper from 2017 that surveyed several hundred papers in the literature that talked about electronic data capture and paper data capture. And it turns out that despite the fact that when you're doing electronic data capture, you can QA the data at the time it goes in. You don't have to enter it twice. You can give your participants a lot of control over what you do with their data. You can move that data at the time you collect it to other systems where you're going to analyze it. Despite these advantages, there's something about the culture of healthcare and information technology and people who work in this field where they're very resistant to change. So some of the disadvantages that were cited, some of them psychological in my opinion, the complexity of doing this, cost, because you need software to do it, the lack of IT support, the fact that if you're collecting data in the field, sometimes these things go down. Imagine if you're doing a clinical research project in Africa, right, and your mobile device stops, inefficiency, et cetera. So the jury, unfortunately, is still out on this, but a lot of people are doing it, and we're going to talk about that. So this figure here shows you all the users of REDCap across the world. So 3,320 institutions have signed a license to use with Vanderbilt to use REDCap. That's 129 countries, and that's almost 1 million people using the software for research. Now, in the scale of software that's used, in various capacities, yes, this is niche software. This isn't Excel. This isn't R. But it's the only game out there. There is nothing else out there non-proprietary that compares to what REDCap can do for electronic data collection. So it's what's used in research. It's what's used at research institutions. Every year there's a conference, REDCap Con. This is some pictures from 2018 in Chicago in South America. It's not a user group conference, it's an administrator conference. So people who run REDCap at these institutions, we go to it, we talk about research informatics, innovating in REDCap, we present posters, we'll talk about some of that work later. And locally here at Indiana University, just to make a point, in 2012, when we first measured this, there were 500 users of REDCap. And I'll talk about the history of REDCap at IU in a moment. We're up to 3,500 active users of REDCap, all doing research. That's 200 peer-reviewed publications that used REDCap last year. I didn't do the math for this because it's a little bit of a hard calculation to get the data, but I'll get it soon. but convert that into grant dollars that REDCap supports. And I guarantee you that other than common applications that everybody uses, this is the one application that supports the most grant dollars at the university, without a doubt. So who's using REDCap at Indiana University? We took all of the users, all 3,500 of them. We mapped them into Active Directory services. We made a nice word cloud to make a point. A lot of different departments are interested in REDCap. IN, RSDT, that's the School of Medicine. They have a hard to decipher code. You see the nursing school, emergency medicine, psychology. You see some unexpected ones, the VPIT, the law school, School of Education. All the campuses are represented. Most of them associated with the School of Medicine. So most of the use of REDCap, about 50% is researchers in the School of Medicine, to be expected. And just to add an exclamation point to all of this, the most important journal in the field, the Journal of Biomedical Informatics, they did a retrospective study of the last 50 years of papers that were published in their journal. And they did this in December of last year. And they chose the original paper about REDCap from 2009 as the most important paper that affected research informatics and medical informatics in the last 50 years. So just to make an exclamation point, electronic data capture is really important. Research informatics is important. REDCap is absolutely essential for this kind of work. And it's documented in the literature. It's not just hyperbole up here giving a talk. That's the citation for the original paper. Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. It's a short paper. Go read it. It's a good one. If you're interested in research informatics, you want to understand what people were thinking about when they developed REDCap, it's all on this paper. It's very, very well written, very easy to understand. So just a timeline to kind of bring this all together. 2005, Vanderbilt released REDCap. That's a picture of Dr. Paul Harris. He's the principal investigator. Probably one of the most distinguished people in the world when it comes to research informatics and tools for research informatics. He was the one who founded REDCap, founded the REDCap consortium. He's the one that you talk to if you have trouble with your REDCap license in Vanderbilt. He's a great guy. 2008, the Indiana CTSI was founded. 2009, that JBI paper was published. In 2010, the IU School of Medicine signed the license with REDCap here at the university. Initially, Research Technologies didn't run REDCap. It was the School of Medicine Department of Biostatistics. They ran it for about a year, and then after that, they said, hey, you know what? I think Research Technologies could support the infrastructure better. So we started to support the infrastructure. But the School of Medicine and the Department of Biostatistics, they were the ones who controlled the service. And that's why I make this distinction. In 2018, just last year, was when Research Technologies took over the full service, where we became the service owner for REDCap. Meaning that, and I'll talk about this later, what the service is, we are the point of accountability, not just for the infrastructure, but for the delivery of the service to all the researchers. And that's an important distinction. So who uses REDCap? Just some fun. If you go to, I mean, we all know if we go to Google, you can find anything. Don't do this search without the safe filter on. But a couple of people with REDCaps: research scientists, data managers, data entry staff, statisticians, programmers, students, systems analysts. If you touch the raw data in a research project, you touch REDCap. That's that simple. Just a little bit. I could spend easily a whole hour talking about translation science, because it's one thing to say REDCap is used for medical research, clinical research, but it's a particular kind of clinical research, something called translation science. And in fact, this idea, it's so confusing and hard to understand. There was an editorial in the journal Nature last year called Translating Translation. What does this word mean? If you pay attention to health research, there's a phrase that's thrown around, it's kind of funny. It's called bench to bedside. So bench, going from very basic research to bedside, going to clinical care. That implies a linear process. It's not linear. And so the NIH National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, they've actually put out an informational website to help educate people at universities, people who are evaluating this research about what translational research really is. And I pulled this from their website. And I won't go into the details other than to say, for one thing, it's not basic research. So when we're talking about REDCap, we're not talking about test tube research that's addressing mechanism. We're not talking about simulation studies that address mechanism, at the level of molecules and genes and so forth. We're talking about one level removed from that. So you've got an idea from studying mechanism, and now you want to test an animal model, and or you want to bring it into basic clinical research in a trial. They make that distinction. The other distinction they make, it's not linear. There's different aspects of the process, and it goes back and forth. And I just want to make that point. It's an important point. I'd encourage you to go look it up as well. So what does all that translational research look like here at the university? I took 2 pages from the Research Technologies annual report for 2018. What it looks like is one software project doing a lot of good in the state of Indiana. We had projects that benefited infant mortality. We had projects that benefited the elderly in nursing homes. We have projects that benefit disadvantaged mothers, who are having difficulty taking care of their families. So we'll talk about technology, but for me, when I come into work, I care about my team, I care about helping researchers, and I care about the fact that can we connect something that we're doing to some tangible outcome out there in the state, out there in the country. I mean, this is really important to me. So thankfully in research technologies, as you know, we care a lot about impact highlights. And there's a reason for this, because it connects the work that we're doing every day to some tangible benefit to the university and to society. And so I think it's absolutely crucial that we publish these, and I put a lot of energy, working with Winona and Rob and Therese to publish these sorts of things. So I want to emphasize that. And I'd also ask you, because I'm not doing justice to these studies, they're interesting. Go read them. If you look at IT News website, we try to publish one about once every 2 months or so. We try to put one out. That's about the pace we're doing them now. Right, Winona? Once every 2 months or so? Once a month now? Wow. Very good. Thank you. So I would encourage you, and this is not a bait and switch. My background is in math and biochemistry and computer science. I know how to use REDCap, but I'm not going to give you a demo of REDCap today. And I'm not going to try to go through every feature. Get an account. Bring your data collection problem to it. It's useful in research problems. It's also useful for just basic operations data collection. So I'd encourage everybody in here to go get an account and explore it. And I put this up there just to give you a visual taste of all the different things that REDCap touches. But I will very quickly show some screenshots and just go through 5 REDCap features just to give you something concrete. And this also gave me an excuse to embarrass Andy Aronson, who you see in this beautiful picture from last year's REDCap Con. So I thought I'd just put that up there. And Andy, if you're out there, thank you for this picture. I had a lot of fun with it. Oh, and by the way, Andy, you should blame Catherine, because I found it on her Twitter site. And we'll leave it at that. So REDCap is easy. 2 teams typically come together when you're going to use REDCap in a project. It's your research team that knows the data, your informatics team that's going to actually be working in REDCap. And typical 4-stage project lifecycle, we all know this, and if we all know this, and we should all be doing this. I mean, this is very standard. Requirements analysis, then a development stage, then a prototype, then an actual deployment. And this just makes the point that doing a REDCap project is like doing any other project. The other point I want to make is most people, when you hear REDCap, you think surveys. You think, oh, it's like Qualtrics. I can do a survey in REDCap. Not quite. So when you're doing research, yes, you may interact with REDCap because you got a survey in the email. What REDCap's actually doing is modeling very complex study designs. So all research happens in time, right? And depending on the type of study that you've set up, there's going to be, for the computer scientists in the room, there's going to be a different kind of directed graph that results in the study. REDCap models these directed graphs and gives you very sophisticated ways to build data collection in at different points in your study, depending on how you've designed the study. So just to make that point that, yes, REDCap does surveys. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what it means to actually design a research study. And those who've done research know all about this. So you start a project, two-step duo. Every piece of software at the university needs to be doing this now. One click, you get into REDCap. One click, and you can start your project. REDCap's nice. If you look at the bottom here on the right, it gives you many templates. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can start with a template that probably matches the basic research that you're doing. Once you're actually designing your project, a nice checklist of things to follow. There's a lot of detail on this slide, so I'm just trying to draw your attention to the checklist and the fact that as most decent software, a lot of the possibilities are accessible in a menu. My favorite part of REDCap, and most people find this the most boring part, is you don't have to do things as a user interface. If you know your data, it gives you a domain-specific language so that you can write in Excel, design your project, put it in there. You don't have to work in the UI. Here's a screenshot from the Precision Genomics Clinics Patients Database at the university. Don't worry, I blocked out all the names. There's no PHI on this screen. Just to make a point that we're using this for real data collection. And as you're collecting data in a study, it gives you nice QA dashboards to kind of see that, whether you've collected all your data or not. Finally, if you're collaborating, you may not want to give everybody access to all your data. So there's a lot of options for configuring different parts of your study that people can access, things they can do with your data. Can they take it out of the system, et cetera. This is absolutely critical when it comes to meeting university compliance requirements. These configurations are very important and something we pay a lot of attention to. So again, finally here, it's extensible. So if you're a software engineer, REDCap doesn't do what you want it to do, you can build tools to extend it. So that's just if you want to learn something about REDCap, go to our training sessions. We have online office hours every week. There's a lot of opportunities to learn. I just wanted to show you something about REDCap, just because it seems appropriate here. So, how many people here have gone through the MORE training besides me and Essen and Matt, Rob? Anybody else in the room? First, I'd recommend this. I know there's a spectrum of opinions about any opportunity you have at the university. I found this to be very valuable, and one of the phrases that they gave us from the MORE training was, get up on the balcony. And when you get up on the balcony, you look at things from a broader perspective. So let's move on and look at REDCap from a bit of a broader perspective here. Really, there was a paper published last fall in the Journal of Clinical and Translational Science. What they did was they surveyed all 60 of the CTSI-like organizations around the country. And they tried to identify a couple of different patterns. Number one was, if you're going to have a successful research informatics program, what are the components? What does that look like? Number two, who has locus of control? That's your left side. Who has the locus of control over these components? Is it an informatics team, the equivalent of research technologies? Is it your research office, which would be the Office of Research Administration? Is it your CIO IT, which is a little ambiguous because our research technologies is in the CIO IT office, or is it some other group? So who has locus of control over these? And who funds it? Who pays for it? And here at the bottom of this slide is electronic data capture, REDCap. And you'll notice that locus of control is with informatics. So because not every university is fortunate enough to have a group like Research Technologies, the closest equivalent is what we would call the Informatics group. So it makes sense that Research Technologies owns something like REDCap, at least according to the evidence from other institutions. Who pays for it? It's a mixture. So it's a mixture of institutional grants and then fee for service. And right now, we're primarily institutional in terms of support of REDCap and grants, not as much fee for service. We can't charge for REDCap, but there's an opportunity here to go after more consulting dollars, I think, if we're gonna bring it in line to what some of the best practices are at some of these other institutions. So I wanted to step back and look at REDCap from the point of view of supporting research informatics. This paper's got a lot of other great information in it, and I have a link to it. I'll send it out afterward. So another big picture. I come to work, and the things that I'm most passionate about are managing my team and getting in front of a whiteboard and bouncing ideas at people. That's what really gets me interested. So a couple weeks ago, it was Anurag Shankar and myself and David Pierce. We were looking at the infrastructure for the Precision Health Grand Challenge. And thankfully, Anurag made us a nice diagram. We don't have to look at the whiteboard. And I just want to draw attention to REDCap here in the left corner. So data sources, data stores and processing, data services. So if you're going to tackle something like a grand challenge, what does the information architecture look like for a service like this? I'm not going to go into too many details except to point out, I guess, a couple of things here. One is electronic data capture. REDCap's right in the middle of this. So all of the disease teams that are collecting clinical research information that's going to be analyzed by the data science group, by other users, they're all using REDCap to collect that information. So every patient of record who's part of the Precision Health Grand Challenge is in REDCap. And the data from REDCap flows into what we're calling our Precision Health Data Commons. Right now, that's a giant Oracle database with a lot of logic on top of it. It doesn't have to be Oracle. It is Oracle for various reasons. Besides data from REDCap, there's a lot of external genomic sequencing data. So every patient whose clinical data comes out of REDCap or comes out of the Regenstrief access to the electronic health record systems gets mapped up to data in REDCap, and then we're slowly but surely generating genomic sequence for them. All of this ends up in two places, like I said, in the Oracle database or on Research Technologies systems. It's available there for research data analysis, and then it gets moved to various data services that we're offering. So whether it be HIPAA enclaves, meaning compute infrastructure that you can compute on this data, software services like RShiny, Tableau, or Indiana University has a public-private partnership with a company called Lifomic. They're located in Indianapolis, just outside the medical school. You should look them up. It's one of the most important partnerships with the university right now. We're an investor in Lifomic, a partial owner. And our data is also flowing into the applications that they're developing, and they're working with our disease teams. So all of this complexity of this information architecture to just point out that REDCap and electronic data capture is right at the center of this, driving this research. And just two more ideas. There's no time to touch on these in any depth, but when you're talking about electronic data capture, you're also talking about reproducible research. So those of you who read the news know that one of the great scandals of our age is all the falsified research out there. It's absolutely tragic and shameful. And one little bit that we can do to help prevent this, to help keep honest people honest is really what it comes down to. A lot of this is cultural. There's so much pressure on people to publish that they throw their character out the window and they're just going after keeping their job. It's not an excuse, but there's something cultural there too that needs to be addressed. But REDCap's very relevant to this because First, you have electronic data capture. All of that's audited in REDCap. And then it's very easy to automatically move data from REDCap to other systems. We develop tools for that. So REDCap becomes really a step in any template for reproducible research. And this was a book that was published last year. I'd recommend it. It's published by UC Berkeley Press, called The Practice of Reproducible Research. It focuses on the data-intensive sciences. So it's very relevant to the research technology stack and the kind of work that we do. And finally, again, just an idea slide about research data management lifecycle. When you're collecting data, you have to care about archiving it, publications. Does it need to be made available to other people? Is it present in such a way that people can generate hypotheses from it? If it's sensitive data, can you de-identify it and move it to places where people can use it? REDCap's at the heart of this research data management lifecycle as well. And so I present this as just a pointer for further reflection. So we've talked about the Advanced Biomedical IT core and research technologies. You know a little bit about REDCap now, at least a larger context. So let's talk about our service offering. How do we actually support REDCap here at the university? So I'm going to pause, and I hope you permit me. I'm not trying to be sentimental, but this is my favorite slide in the whole deck. This is the Advanced Biomedical IT core. Andy, Catherine, Nancy, Ryan, Abhi, Radha, Alexander, Jim, and JD. JD, well, I'm not going to mention his name because he really cares about privacy. Didn't want me to put his face up here. He's a very humble guy. But those of you who know JD know who JD is. So I'll just leave it at that. So this is our team. And I alluded to this at the beginning. We're an IT shop. We offer cyber infrastructure. When you talk about cyber infrastructure, the first thing you talk about, or you should talk about, is your people. You're only as good as your staff. You're only as good a partner as your staff is motivated and engaged in what they're doing. You're only as good of a partner to researchers as your staff are challenged. There's something that human resources is doing right now that I think is really useful. You may have taken the Gallup survey that they sent around, the different factors of employee engagement. There was a book published well over a decade, almost 2 decades ago, called "What the World's Greatest Managers Do Differently." And it was at the time, the largest survey of management internationally. And they came up with several different principles for evaluating what does it mean to be engaged at work. And this is not a talk about employee engagement, so I'm not going to go too far off the reservation here. But let me just say that, number one, when you have a staff and you're a manager, your number one job is removing obstacles. Does your staff have what they need to get their job done? Is your staff challenged? Do they have people that care about them at work? I mean, these are all things that are addressed in this survey. I think this is such an important topic. I want to dedicate a little bit of time to it here. It's very easy to just come into work, clock in, clock out, and forget that we're people, and that we need to help each other and be motivated. And especially if you're a manager, I hope this is not too preachy, but especially if you're a manager, you got to take seriously the responsibility you've been given. So, all right, off my soapbox. Service management. We do project management, user support and education, technology operations, and R&D and technical consulting. This is how we've divided up the different work streams for supporting REDCap at the university. So project management, this is Robert Henschel and myself. We do this for REDCap. It means paying attention to what's important and setting priorities correctly. It means having some disciplined model for offering a service. We're not going for certification, but we've chosen to emulate as best as we can the practices of ISO 20000 for IT service management. The ISO is the International Standards Organization. It's a body of voluntary membership of over 150 countries across the world. It exists to facilitate world trade. It is the bar for excellence in terms of offering services of all types in all different disciplines. So ISO 20000 is what's relevant to a system like REDCap. It covers things like service level expectations, capacity planning, operations monitoring, communication plans, continuity plans, things that sound kind of mundane, but they're not. They're actually really hard to do well. And it's the other thing that's a virtue of this. It's a standard. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It leaves it totally open for you to interpret how to implement this. And so we're going through it internally. Again, this is self-imposed. Nobody told us we had to do this, but we're going through this internally with REDCap. Risk management, Anurag's here in the audience. I just want to say thank you. And all of us should thank Anurag. I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. If it wasn't for Anurag and the work that he's done over the last decade, we wouldn't be able to support clinical research on any of our systems. And he's one of those people who, sorry to embarrass you like this. He's one of those people who I talked about at the beginning, who inspires me and motivates me, and I really enjoy working with. So I just want to take a moment to recognize you for that. We use NIST 853, the National Institute of Standards and Technology has published a set of guidelines and security controls for how do you achieve the highest levels of cybersecurity in different use cases. So I'm oversimplifying that. It's really hard to do that as well. But we work closely with Anurag and the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research on our risk management. I work closely along with Robert and Matt with the data stewards. The data stewards, the data management group at Indiana University, they pay attention to are your systems fit for purpose for different categories of institutional data, whether it be critical, restricted, internal, or public. Most research is public, thankfully. All health research, unless it's de-identified data, is critical. So it's kind of interesting. In research technologies, we've got to split the difference between doing something that benefits most research that exists out in the world and also doing something that benefits a niche of very high value research. It's sometimes difficult to do that. And finally, metrics. We publish a dashboard, Tableau dashboard in the university. So user support and education, that's Catherine Bauer-Martinez, Alexander Valenzuela, and Radha Surya. This is really the heart and soul of REDCap at the university, because all those 200 publications that came from REDCap, behind that was 3,500 users. And of those 3,500 users, they have deadlines. Some of them are learning REDCap for the first time. The types of questions that we get, and I'll talk about this in a minute, they're not necessarily easy questions to answer. We're very much, in supporting REDCap, a partner in all of this research that we do. So what Alexander does, what Radha does, and their leader, what Catherine does, is absolutely important. And I just want to emphasize that, because if we lose this function, we lose a lot of potential in terms of the research that we're offering. Thank you. So some statistics, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Those of you who run services know that these aren't, this is a lot of tickets. I don't want to diminish it. It's not 30,000 students sending tickets, right? But it's 3,500 researchers sending tickets. And these tickets are a little bit harder to answer. Administrative tickets are if a researcher is going to do something with their project where they might lose data. Now think about that for a minute. Somebody writes to you with a ticket, we want to make a change, and if you make a mistake, that researcher could lose data. That's a lot of pressure, isn't it? Right? So those are our administrative tickets. Account tickets are more routine. And then questions. So you're trying to do one of those elaborate study designs in REDCap. You're trying to put REDCap to good use. you write in with what I'm calling a question, the green bar. And I would just, on the left side is the ticket volume that we saw per quarter for 2018. On the right side is the mean business days to resolve the ticket. So our policy is we try to respond to tickets within 24 hours. Resolution time varies. You'll notice that the largest bar here is the green bar for questions. Questions are researchers who've come to us because they're trying to use REDCap for their work. It takes us about a week on average because there's a lot of dialogue, sometimes a phone call, sometimes a Zoom call, sometimes an in-person meeting that needs to be done to resolve these sorts of tickets. So sometimes it'll take about a week. This just to make the point that this is not by any means routine support. This is very hard to provide this support function. Technology operations, this is Andy Aronson. Andy, if I said that the support team was kind of the heart and soul of REDCap, if I had to pick one human being, it would be Andy, who's really the heart and soul of REDCap. Andy lives and breathes REDCap. So, what are some of the things that Andy has to do? Well, we have 2 major release cycles a year. And there's a whole lot of steps to get a release of REDCap out, from evaluating the features, static code analysis, upgrades to our infrastructure, QA, working with our users to get user QA done. We only do 2 big releases a year. But because of the sensitivity of the data in REDCap, we can't sit on patches. So Andy, many a Sunday, which is when we have to do our maintenance hours, by necessity. Many a Sunday, Andy will log in and he'll do the patch update, the security update. He's on top of all of the security bulletins that are related to REDCap. He and Catherine, for that matter, they're both key participants in the REDCap consortium internationally. So if you go to one of those REDCap Con meetings, Andy and Catherine are almost, they're very well known. I won't call them celebrities there, but they're very well known at these meetings. So I just want to mention Andy in this context because those of you who run services know this. It's a thankless job to have to get up on Sunday and do a release. That's a thankless job, and somebody's got to do it. And Andy does a lot more than that. Andy's he was computational. He worked in computational biology. He's a software engineer. He's worked in different parts of research technologies. He's well known, and he's really he's really the heart of this. I'll just stop there. Another beautiful diagram from Anurag. This is from our NIST documentation. REDCap's standard LAMP stack. So it's Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, oldie but goodie. I know it's not exciting, but there's still a lot of good PHP code out there, and if you know how to write it, it's good. Just a quick glance at some operations statistics. So daily user logins, almost 1,000 on many days. Concurrent users, up to 200 right now. 250 with some spikes. We haven't had a chance to go do root cause analysis on why we had almost 800 people on that day. Not sure yet. Pardon? Maybe. Database usage, just to make the point that our databases are growing, and besides the structured data that you're putting into REDCap, you can upload files to it too as part of your research data collection. So we're growing. All of our infrastructure is in the intelligent infrastructure, and I should call out another group. I don't see him here. Joe Butler and his team, Campus Bridging and Research Infrastructure, another group here in Research Technologies. They run our application servers, and so they're really important. Finally, the last function that I want to talk about is R&D and Technical Consulting. And it's almost absurd that I'm going to take the most interesting part and put it for last. That's because I want Jim to actually come and give a presentation to you where he goes into depth about some of the work that we're doing. But in a nutshell, I'll just highlight one thing really quick. You collect data into REDCap. One of the most important things with any system, any system for data collection, is it can't be a silo. You've got to move the data out of that system to other places. And so one of the most important problems that Jim's been working on is how can we leverage our high performance computing as a production system in a robust way that does not put any additional burden on our support staff. How can we use our HPC systems as a production system in a robust way that does not increase the need for additional staff? Or if it does, we can justify it. We've actually figured that out. We use Singularity and containers and the batch queue, and we're working on something called REDCap ETL, which is a way of moving data out of REDCap into databases, into other systems where people are doing data analysis. And we're using our HPC systems as sort of the container for running these workloads. So that's work that's just come off the shelf. We're going to be writing a paper. Hopefully we'll publish that in the Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association this year. And we're going to be trying to offer a service around that as well. It turns out, for the sake of time, I'm just going to mention that we've, each year at REDCapCon, we do a presentation about different R&D that we do. This was a wrapper that Jim wrote around the REDCap API. That's very well used. This was, actually I'll dwell, I think I've got enough time to do this. So one of the largest, it was, I believe it was the largest grant to a principal investigator at Indiana University until last fall. A recent Alzheimer's grant has taken over, but this is the Optimistic project from Regan Street. Optimizing patient transfers, impacting medical quality, and improving symptoms, transforming institutional care. This was a $30.3 million grant since 2012 from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And they came to us with a problem. They said, hey, we're using REDCap in 40 nursing homes throughout the state of Indiana. We're using REDCap to collect data. Right now, we're having to download things manually out of REDCap. We'd like to have dashboards so that all of our nurse practitioners and people on the ground can look at the data in dashboards as we're collecting it and can make adjustments, not for clinical care. It's really important. Research technologies, we don't do clinical care. We don't have our systems with doctors in front of patients, but very close in this case, process improvement. So they want to be able to look at the data, to be able to give feedback to nurses who are doing process improvement in nursing homes. So they came to us and they said, hey, we need a solution that makes it easy for analysts, but not programmers, to move and transform data out of REDCap. And so we built a system called REDCap ETL that allows you to do that. Basically, it allows you to define your own transformation rules. Your own transformation rules for moving the data, how it's represented in REDCap to different structures and different databases and so on. Main point here is that this is a service that we're going to be offering that we've already got 2 clients, one of them being what was the largest grant at the university, the Optimistic project, another being the Alzheimer's Disease Consortium. And what I would anticipate is that many users of REDCap are going to want a tool like this. And in order for us to offer a service, we had to figure out how to make it production, use our HPC resources to do that, and we've done that. And so over the next year, we're going to be talking about how do we actually make this a chargeback service that we can offer. So that's the end of my talk. I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for your patience. And just end where we began, with a real simple notion. I know it sounds kind of mundane, talk about happiness, but I think we all want to be happy. Happiness is really important. And for me, and I took a quote here this is from traditional philosophy. So if you go through many different philosophical traditions, you'll find the same sentiment. Happiness is meaning that you're doing something useful and meaningful, right? Is it useful? Is it meaningful? And I think whatever our discipline, whether we're managers or programmers, associate vice presidents, directors, I'm serious here. we have an opportunity every day to do something useful and to do something meaningful if we take our jobs and ourselves seriously. So I would just like to close with those remarks, because I feel very privileged to work at Indiana University, to be part of research technologies, to have a great team, great colleagues, and I just wanted to end on that sentiment. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. That's it.